then without any further ado, we're going to turn it over to John for the workshop.
Thank you, Julia.
Just so you all know, I'm going to be taking notes, which you will get, so you're welcome to take notes, or you can take mine. I still take them like I'm a student of John's, which I was a long time ago.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Mayor. It's good opportunity for me to be here with you and visit with you about my stuff. In addition to the council role, I've been president of the Domestic Violence Center and a board, the board in Lawrence, and I'm also on the board of the Watkins History Museum, and in Kansas City I'm on the board of Economic Development group as well. So I'm still, I guess, keeping active, huh? So, let me tell you the way I approach learning. I read one time recently where somebody said, you cannot learn from unique experiences because by definition, it will never occur again. It's unique, okay? The only way we can learn from quote unquote unique experiences is to act as if they are not unique. Act as if the experience is an example of something. It may not be the totality of the experience, it may be a piece of the experience. Because once we can categorize, then we can start comparing and contrasting, and that's a large part of the way we learn. So what I do is, my work is designed, in my mind, the way I think about it is, I try to create for you categories, concepts, ideas that you can help you to more fully, or not more fully, but maybe from a different perspective, to understand the experiences that you have. So for each of you, I'm assuming that this will be unique, and your learning is your learning, and I think that's really, really important to me. So let me show you what we're going to do today. But let me tell you a little bit about Lawrence first, because that's where I'm from, the University of Kansas. I was on the council, as Julia said. I was on the council from 1991 to 1999, so 2 4-year terms. In Lawrence is a town of 100,000 people. It's a university town, the University of Kansas. We're a full-service city, so we're located about 45 minutes west of the Kansas City metro area, which is about 2 million people now. And we're about a half hour east of the state capital, which is Topeka. But surrounding us is mostly semi-rural, and so we are a full-service city. So I really got exposure to a lot of different kinds of things. And now I help coordinate a class in infrastructure management. And it's funny, I mean, my biggest learning as a council member, and my most enjoyable learning as a council member, I can't believe I'm saying this, was infrastructure. I just, I mean, the difference between the idea that, water runs under pressure, wastewater runs by gravity, stormwater is connected to watersheds. I mean, it's like, oh, wow, I didn't know any of that stuff. That's cool. So I love to go by city construction sites now and stop every once in a while. What are you guys doing? Harassing them, I guess. But nevertheless, it's kind of fun for me. Lawrence is, in some ways, a typical Midwestern college town. And so a lot centers around the university itself, but also around the downtown. So we have what we think is a very special downtown. It's kind of a classic sort of downtown with a main street, Massachusetts Street, and it's about 4 or 5 blocks long. It's got historic facades, a treescape, really kind of cool. So it's kind of a neat, and I'll tell you a little bit about that because my stories come from Lawrence, of course. Also, 5-member council. We're council manager city. 5-member council. We have an election every, would you like to? Sure.
I'll write the late notes. I apologize.
Oh, I forgot to tell you, I was also on the library board. Gee, I've done a lot. It's like, wow, man, I've done a lot, haven't I? I remember that. And we have a fabulous library, by the way. It's really cool. I love it. Just absolutely love it. In fact, I'm now in a, Wii Bowling? We have a Wii Bowling league for senior citizens at the library. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. We're going to have a Wii golfing league in the wintertime, starting in January. So I'm going to get the men's golf club out there and see what they can do. So we have 5 council members, and we're all elected at large. We have an election every 2 years. Every 2 years. 3 seats are up for contested every 2 years. The top 2 were at large, so the top 2 vote getters get a 4-year term. The 3rd place person gets a 2-year term. So what that means is that every 2 years, people can elect, quote unquote, a new majority if they want to. But on the other hand, there's still 2 people who will have 2 more years to go. So there's continuity on the council as well. In addition, we do not directly elect our mayor. Our mayor is chosen from among the council, and by tradition, the top 2 vote getters, those who have a 4-year term, will have a 1-year term as mayor. So I was really the council's mayor. I was not directly elected. Nevertheless, it is a really fulfilling, very fulfilling experience, I think, being the mayor. Okay, so let me show you what we're going to do today. And this is the outline. And it starts with this notion that a gap exists and is growing between what is politically acceptable and what is operationally sustainable. So when I talk about political acceptability, what I'm talking about is what is it that we want to do? Okay, what is it, where is our political will? What is it that we want to do? And then the second piece of this is, can we do it? Okay, and not only can we do it, but can we do it over time? Not just once. Can we do it over time? So that in order for anything significant to get done, it's got to be something that has political will. We want to do it, okay, but it also has to have administrative capacity, money. Can we do it? A lot of times we commonly think that the sequence of the way we deal with problems is we agree on what we want to do, and then we confront the notion of can we do what. But in fact, if you look at your agendas, what you will find is that in many, many cases, it goes the opposite way. That there are operational needs that staff will say, we need to do this. And then the question is there the political will to do it? Okay? So this is particularly true of infrastructure needs, which are not visible to the general public, right? And you've got all these needs. They say, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. And then the question is the political will there? Okay? Is the political will there to raise the money in order to do it, to allocate the money in order to do it, whatever. Now, the interesting thing, while that makes a lot of sense, I think it makes a lot of sense that we need to make that connection, the fact of the matter is that your form of government, council manager government, is actually designed to separate politics from administration. All right? So, look, that's you. Okay? Governing body, staff, city manager in the middle. So what we're trying to do, what your form of government is designed to do, is to create a structure where administrative expertise, okay, where knowledge can be conveyed to the political, to the governing body in a way that you can tell the governing body what they need to know without fear of political repercussions rather than what they want to hear. Okay? And the only way we can do that is by creating a separation. And that's what this council manager form of government is about. But it's also what merit systems are about. It's also what employee rights are about. It's also what competitive bidding is about. All of these things are designed, you see, they're designed to create the integrity of an administrative apparatus that can bring knowledge to bear, can freely bring knowledge to bear without concern of the political, well, I won't say without concern of the political consideration, but without fear of personal repercussions. So for example, we have a very good example right now at the federal level, the business of the whistleblower. So, I mean, you know, the idea that we want to know the identity of the whistleblower, hello, that's not what the concept of whistleblower is about. The concept of whistleblower is we want to create a condition where people who have access, people who have access to information can, you know, tell us something's going on, you know, you need to know about it without fear of being of personal repercussions. So the concept, see, of whistleblower goes with that separation, the separation. Now, the city manager is in the middle of that, and we understand, this is a common diagram, okay? But I think if I could do it as a slide, I would, is instead of this, I would make it an hourglass. Okay, so here's political, and then the political gets channeled through the city manager and then down to the administrative apparatus, or vice versa. Okay, that's where administrative goes through, and so on and so forth. Okay, that's the concept. The problem is that in my mind, today's environment is such that that concept is a little bit outmoded. In other words, what's happening in my mind is that this hourglass, okay, the hourglass now looks like this. That middle piece is getting bigger, all right? And as that middle piece gets wider, more people like yourselves are drawn into the gap. So that more than the city manager or the city manager's office is now expected, this is a growing evolution, it's more than an evolution because it's really fast. It is a growing adaptation to this idea that we have to make the connection. It's getting harder to make the connection. It exceeds the capacity of the city manager or the city manager's office. Therefore, people like department heads get drawn into this notion of connecting what's politically acceptable, administratively sustainable, and the issue is, are you prepared to do that? Okay? So what I do is I say, okay, here's how you prepare to do that. There are two paths. The first path, and what I call this, is political astuteness. So going from a department head orientation that looks downward and across, and those of you who are council members who've been in departments, you know what I'm talking about. Downward and across to downward, across, and up. And the trick is, how do you do that without being politically captured? How do you do that without interfering in normal course of business? How do you do that without losing the trust and confidence in your employees who see you playing politics, all right? Well, it takes political astuteness to do that in a manner that avoids those traps. And the first path is understanding that working the gap is facilitated by understanding that politics involves choices among conflicting values. And we will talk about those values because these are fundamental democratic values that are guaranteed to conflict. If the values did not conflict, we would not need politics. Okay? Politics, see, when I say politics, am I yelling now? Politics, as I use the term politics, it's like a way of conducting business. It is a way of doing business when the analytics won't take you to the decision. Because we don't know. We don't know, even no matter how much we know, we can still disagree on whether we're going to go for Chinese food tonight or Mexican food. I don't care how much knowledge we have, there are those people who want Mexican food and are those people who want Chinese food. And so, you know what we're going to do? We're going to vote. Who wants Chinese food tonight? Who wants Mexican food tonight? All right? And we'll vote, and it'll be a tie. And then somebody, maybe the mayor, then the mayor would say, look how about we do Chinese food tonight and Mexican food tomorrow night? And I go, oh, okay, I could buy that. We just did politics with our family reunion, right? Okay? So the first path is understanding these conflicting values, and we'll talk about that. And then the second path is understanding that politics and administration involve more than different behaviors. They are different ways of thinking. They are different mindsets. So even though we use the same words to talk to each other, we are actually speaking different languages. All right? And if you don't understand the other language, then you don't have the full enough understanding to be able to, particularly at the department level, being able to convey to your staff why on earth the council did what they did. All right? So you end up saying, that's just politics. See, when you say, that's just politics, to me, that means you don't understand what just happened here. Okay? All right. So, let me see. What else do I want to say? Oh, I want to tell you, because you probably don't need to know this, but I like to talk about it. The reason why the hourglass is getting wider, the reason why the gap is getting wider, and why more people are drawn into the gap, and why the idea of new knowledge, skills, abilities for people like department heads, all right? The reason is twofold. One is the nature of politics has changed for us a bit. The nature of administration has dramatically changed. And these changes, while they're operating simultaneously, in some cases conflict. And the conflict is what makes it harder to connect the two arenas. So for example, the politics now, more than I think I can remember anyway, is about identity. The politics in our country is about who you are, what you believe in. The politics in our country now is about looking at the past, looking at the present, looking at the future, and asking ourselves the question, who were we? Who are we? What will we become? The mantra, "Make America Great Again," okay, is an identity piece. See, every national political campaign is about, here's where we were, here's where we are, you vote for me, here's where we're going to go. There's a wonderful book, an analytical book about stories and narratives. And the author has done an analysis of stories, narratives, and says that the most powerful stories are stories about identity. Okay? Stories of identity, and the single most important variable in determining the power of a story is the readiness of the audience to hear it. Now think about that. See, when you look at national politics and you go, well, why is it like this, and why are people responding? They're ready to hear this. Okay? So the question is, analytically, you might say, why are we ready to hear these messages now? And then what we do with issues of identity is we seek PLUs. Have you heard that term? It's wonderful. People like us, PLUs. Okay? So it becomes us and them. So it becomes, in many ways, a simplified way of thinking about our politics, of thinking about our environment. Okay? Here's another of my favorite quotes, which is, "Nostalgia for the misremembered past is no way to run a country." Okay? That was in a Newsweek article. Nostalgia for the misremembered past is no way to run a country. A scholar wrote a book about family life in the 1950s. Okay, Ozzie and Harriet, some of you remember, right? You know what the title of the book is? The Way We Never Were. Isn't that great? Okay, so we have this us and them world, okay, going on, and seeking stability, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's sort of anchor, the stability. And what's happening in the administrative world? Things are going crazy. It's nuts. I mean, okay, so this device right here, when was it first introduced?
Late 80s.
When did you say the late 80s?
I thought you were talking about cell phones in general.
No, I'm talking about iPhones. A little over a decade ago. A little over a decade ago. That's all. This device this device has changed the way we think about time. We used to do business with mail. Remember mail?
Snail mail, not email.
Right. And you know, snail mail. I mean, that's a good way to, right? That's a good way to put it. So this world is changing, and that world is changing so rapidly. And for most of us, we can't understand it. You cannot understand, well, I cannot understand a database of 3 million entries, all right? So one of our students, South Korean, she told me the other day, or she wrote this the other day, she said, in South Korea, in Seoul, they have created owl buses, O-W-L, owl buses. These are buses that run from midnight to 5 a.m. Because in Seoul, South Korea, I mean, there's millions and millions of people, right, who live in Seoul, South Korea. And you can imagine with millions and millions of people, there are people from midnight to 5 a.m. who are changing, you know, going home from work or going to work or any of a number of kinds of things. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to create bus routes for these public transportation for these people. You know how they did that? They looked at where taxis were picking up and letting people off between midnight and 5 a.m. And then what they did was they also analyzed 3 million, get it, 3 million phone calls. Where were those phone calls made from? And then they created 8 bus routes. I mean, it's like, hello? What in the world is going on? Either Mercedes-Benz, did any of you see this? Mercedes or BMW has created a monument now, a monument to honor the ignition key. Right? I mean, I saw it. It was on TV or so. It had this monument, it had this ignition key. It's like, what kind of world am I living in? So this is a world of rapid change in contrast to this political world of the way we never were, okay, nostalgia for the misremembered past. And what happens is the hourglass gets wider, okay? And it changes then the nature of trying to connect what's politically acceptable with what's administratively sustainable. All right. Oh, by the way, anytime you want to chime in, please, okay? So, okay, so we've got this pretty standard. When we look at hierarchy or accountability, you know, generally say the governing body makes policy through the city manager conveyed to staff and so on. This is an accountability thing, right? So staff is accountable to the manager is accountable to the governing body, right? I mean, this is what you're in a very basic form. This is what your org chart looks like, all right? Are we okay on that? All right, now look at this. All right, flow of communication. Have you ever looked at an org chart and said, how long is that line? How wide is that line? No, but think about it like this. What if instead of this, we had this? Now, this is the most complicated slide I ever made, and that's why it's hard to understand. It's hard for me to understand sometimes. All right, here's what I want to say about this. First, I have 2 arenas. This is the arena of politics. This is the arena of administration. This is where theoretically we determine what's politically acceptable. All right? Now notice that the governing body is one entity in that arena. So the governing body is a player there, but the totality of determining what's politically acceptable is taking place in the community, right? With so many people, so many players. But what's really, really important is the governing body in some ways is an authorizing agent, right? You are the ones who are going to say, you know, this is what I think we ought to do. You're not going to do that simply because you woke up in the morning and you thought this is what we ought to do. It will be the product of conversations, it will be product of meetings, and so on and so on and so forth. So this is what I say. I say, if you as a governing body, if you as governing body members, if you are playing down here, all right, who's playing up here? See, if your attention is focused on what's going on down here, then you've basically abdicated, that's probably too strong a word, but you in effect, you are giving, I don't really know how to say this, you're giving up an opportunity. That's the thing. You're giving up the opportunity that you have to really make a difference. And that difference is collectively, what is it we want to do? How can I influence that? Who do I need to talk to? How do I develop the credibility so people want to hear what I have to say? Okay? All right? And then down here, of course, we have the staff. Now, what I'm trying to do here is to, with the lines, is to suggest that there is, instead of that one line, goes from governing body to manager, then manager down to, to staff. What I'm saying is there are actually more than one line. Because each line for me, now this is theoretical, each line for me represents an initiative. Because you got multiple initiatives going on at the same time, right? It's not like you just got one thing happening. No, there are multiple things happening. And so what we can see is here we have significant political will and significant administrative capacity. This is good. We're going to get something done. Okay? Here we have some substantial political will, but can we do it? See? It's questionable. There isn't the same level of administrative sort of commitment, because there's a question of, well, if we do this, we're not going to be able to do this, and da-da-da, da-da-da, okay? And here we have an interesting one. We need to do this, but there's no political will. So that's where the manager says, the timing is not right. See, when you say the timing is not right, what you're saying is, yeah, I know we need to do it, but there's nothing up here. I can't, put it on the bookshelf. All right? And here we've got an initiative that has some political will, but hey, man, we can't do that. Or we've tried it before, it isn't going to work, blah, 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 blah. And so, see, managing these lines, and then the interesting thing, too, is that these lines, I have them as originating, see, with the governing body or staff, but in fact, the lines can originate and, whoops, hello. The lines can originate and probably do as much as anything else from community and third parties. So that's why I say it's really important.
They also originate from staff.
And staff, yeah. Sure, they range from staff. See, this is one like would originate from staff. But yeah, exactly. I mean, the whole idea of the agenda is driven by what the governing body wants to do. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, I get that on an accountability basis. But I don't get that on a practical basis. On a practical basis, it's, everybody's doing community policing. We're not doing community policing. We need to do some community policing, okay? And the governing body's going, yeah, that's a great idea, let's do it. Or the governing body's going, I'm not so keen on that. Okay, all right? And so the idea then, the idea of that dynamic between the two and seeing if you can get some connection, that's this. That's where that is happening. And see, what I've done is I've taken this and I moved it from a circle, see that circle, and I'm creating an ellipse. Because what I'm trying to say is the manager's time is being spread, okay? And it gets spread, then she needs allies. See, she needs allies. So that as department people, as department heads, your ability to run your department effectively is now a threshold requirement for success. A threshold requirement. The value added is whether you are seen as an ally of a manager in this. So, for example, Parks and Rec. Where's our Parks and Rec person? Parks and Rec. I mean, Parks and Rec has access to more citizens probably than anyone else, any other department. Right? I'm assuming you do programs and activities and kids and adults and seniors and, right? Okay? So the question is, are you going to play down here? Or what kind of value can you add? How can you add value there? Okay? All right. So let me see where I want to go now. Okay, now what I want to do is a little sidebar. So this is take us off the track a little bit. Let's talk about Maria. Maria is 5 years old. And so she is your daughter, your granddaughter, whatever. And she comes home from school one day, and you say, Maria, what'd you do in school today? And Maria's not yet a teenager, so she's still talking to you, right? And so Maria says, we did numbers today. And the teacher put 2 plus 2 on the board. And I raised my hand and I said, 2 plus 2 equals 4. And then Larry raised his hand and said, no. 2 plus 2 equals 5. Fine. Then the teacher put 2 plus 3 on the board, and I raised my hand and I said, no, 2 plus 3 equals 5. Larry raised his hand and said, no. 2 plus 3 equals 4. So you say to Maria, what did the teacher do at that point? And Maria says, the teacher had us vote on the correct answer. Okay, now, what's wrong with voting on what 2 plus 2 equals? You tell me. What's wrong? Why wouldn't we vote on what 2 plus 2 equals?
There's an objective right answer.
There's an objective right answer. or correct answer. I used to say right answer, and somebody raised their hand and said, it could be a morally right answer. Don't say right answer. Say correct. Okay, it's fine.
That's
No.
probably a lawyer.
Whatever. Oh. Way to go, Steve. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about, we don't vote on problems for which there are correct answers. What we do is we seek people who have the knowledge necessary in order to come up with the correct answer. Okay? If we try to implement a decision on 2 + 2 = 5, that engineer is going to build a bridge that I don't want to cross. Okay? If the stormwater engineer does not believe that water flows by gravity, you're in real trouble. Okay? See, this is where knowledge is bear, technical knowledge comes to bear. So that if we don't vote, if voting is not appropriate on problems for which there are correct answers, when is voting appropriate?
And you're trying to decide between Chinese and Mexican.
Okay? When you're trying to decide between Chinese and Mexican, is there a correct answer? Maybe for the proponent of Chinese or Mexican, but for the rest of us, there's no correct answer. So believe it or not, there actually are problems for which there are no correct answers. That's when we vote, okay? Or when there may be more than one correct answer, then we vote. So voting is appropriate. So let me give you an example. So this is a kind of an embellished Lawrence example. So let's say, let me think about this now. Let's say that there's a substantial parcel of land on the outskirts of town, and that there is a developer who has shown some interest in the property and is interested in bringing in retail and commercial. The property is presently zoned residential, and so it would require rezoning. It's attractive because the developer says, and staff has verified or legitimized the idea that by rezoning this area to commercial retail, we will have additional revenues. All right? This is particularly important because the council has recently responded to an equity interest, not an equity interest, a diversity and inclusion movement promoting affordable housing. All right? The council authorized the development of an affordable housing plan. That plan was adopted a short while ago, but there's no money to implement it. It's going to take some money. The revenues from the new project, okay, can promise to do that. All right, this all sounds good until the downtown business owners hear about it. Now, the downtown business owners are largely, now think about, if you can think about Lawrence, okay, this wonderful downtown, there are virtually no national chains on Massachusetts Street, okay? It's a tourist attraction. It is a major part of the identity of the community. The business owners are saying, if you approve that rezoning, even though we understand the value of the affordable housing, you are going to detract from the economic viability of downtown, and in so doing, you will undermine the identity of this community and its attraction to tourists. So I want to read you something. Okay, this is from the Chamber of Commerce in Lawrence. Maybe it's our proximity to Kansas City, or perhaps it's the influence of the youthful energy generated by a university population of more than 30,000. But culturally, Lawrence in Douglas County is like no other place in Kansas. It's an area rich in diversity of thought and opinion and artistic inspiration. The city of Lawrence embraces that image and owns its unique brand of small town atmosphere, funky vibe, and cultural wealth usually found only in much larger cities. An eclectic collection of dining options in Lawrence's historic downtown indulges residents' and visitors' appetites, while shopping is a delightful adventure of perusing locally owned stores, shops, and boutiques to fit a variety of needs and tastes. The downtown business owners say, if you rezone that property out of town, no matter what benefit, the revenue will come. We will have to pay a price. Okay, what's the correct answer? Are you going to vote for the rezoning? What you should say is, I don't know. Okay? See, now for some people there will be a right answer. But analytically, once we have some idea of, yes, there is a high probability that there will be the revenue, yes, there is a high probability that it will detract from downtown. Now what we are voting on, even though we're voting on the rezoning, what we are actually doing as a governing body is we are weighing the consequences of the choices. See, that's what we are voting on. See, we are voting on, okay, more revenue, affordable housing, declining downtown, or deny the rezoning, put the affordable housing on hold, and maintain the vitality of downtown. All right? The rezoning is the decision, but if you focus on the nuts and bolts of the rezoning itself, that's not where you're adding value as a council. Where you're adding value as a council is which consequences do you think are important to the future of this community. Okay? I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. All right. So let's just a little bit more and then we'll take a break, okay? Next, what I want to show you then, I said the first path to political astuteness is the values, okay? The conflict in the values. And so these are the values that we are talking about. These are not values that I chose. These are values that are fundamental democratic values. You've got to have all four to have a vibrant democracy. So representation, the idea that you as a governing body, you represent, okay, you understand that. Nobody has to tell you that. that is built into your understanding of democratic governance, okay, and that you represent the quote unquote the people, whoever the people are. What I've done is I've also added the notion of participation there, just to broaden it a little bit. Participation or engagement. The second value is efficiency, and I've added the value of professionalism because while efficiency you think of money, professionalism I want you to think in terms of master plans. See, things where, and the knowledge, but the idea that we respect, you know, the planning, the strategic planning, the visioning, all that stuff that you do, the respect for that grows out of this knowledge of efficiency, which is, I think, a lot of times the idea that the greatest good for the greatest number over the long haul. To me, that's an expression of efficiency. The third value is, we could say equity and inclusion, okay? And this is a notion that there are people, there are neighborhoods, there are groups that have been underserved and are deserving of special attention. And then we have individual rights. And these are either property rights, okay, or civil rights that we can talk about it. All four values are absolutely critical to the notion of democracy. If you fail to acknowledge and to respond and to implement any single one of these values over time, it will come back to haunt you. Okay? It doesn't matter which one it is. The easiest one to think about in that light is the value of efficiency. See, if you neglect financial concerns over a long enough period of time, you're going to have a real problem. Okay? But the same can be said of any of these other values as well. And I think we've seen across the country where some of these things have exploded because of neglect. So that when we think of representation and participation, and in the little case study I gave you, see, you as a council, you're going to hear from the developer, you're going to hear from staff, but you're going to hear from the developer, and you're going to hear from the downtown business owners, right? Now, nobody needs to tell you that you need to listen to them. They don't need to. They'll let you know you need to listen to them if you don't already. But it's just built in. It's like, you know, kids, I don't know how old you, now I'm always surprised, they have elections in school for this and that, and someone say, you're a little kid, you know, your teacher can handle that. You know, they don't need help, but, you know, student council and all that stuff. It's all practice. See, that's all it is, it's practice. It's practice for the big time, when you're able to vote. That's the big time, okay? So, we're going to hear from, and what's important here about the value of representation, it's not a single concentrated sort of initiative, that within the value of representation we can have conflict itself. So who are we going to listen to? Downtown business owners or the developer? Okay. The second, the value of efficiency, that's where the revenue picture comes into play, and where the analysis of the revenue picture, and also the notion of the greatest good for the greatest number over the long haul. This sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah? What if you're a minority in that community? What have I just told you? You don't count. Do you see the value? See the value differences. Greatest good for the greatest number of the long haul is good if you're not a political minority. If you're a political minority, I just discounted you. Okay? Unless you have this grandiose notion of what the political political good is. The equity concern here was the idea that we have the affordable housing, okay, and that generated from an equity and inclusion task force, all right? And then the idea of individual rights can easily be translated into, the developer saying, I own this property, I have a right for you to, you need to look at this rezoning request seriously. I'm a property owner, private property, acquisition of right of way, all that stuff that's connected with that. Now, here are some observations about the values. And then we're going to watch I think we'll watch the video, then take a break. Wait, yeah. Or take a break and then take a break then. All right, we'll take a break and then watch the video. Okay, here are some observations about the values. First, do you believe in majority rule? I know people always are I don't know why you're reluctant to say, yeah, I believe in majority rule. What? In fact, why are we reluctant to say we believe in majority rule?
I think part of it goes back to what you just talked about if you are a political minority or making sure that you're balancing interests.
Okay, all right. So,
can you repeat what he said? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it.
I said part of it goes back to what Mr. Lane was talking about. If you're a political minority and balancing different perspectives and the greater good. So if you always go majority rule, you may very well have something that is inequitable to a minority group.
okay. So, do you believe in individual rights? Yeah? Who are individual rights protecting you from? Wait a minute. We believe in majority rule. We believe in individual rights. Okay, I get that. So what's the correct balance?
There's certain inalienable rights, right?
There are certain inalienable rights, which we probably make exceptions to every once in a while, like free speech. Okay, free speech unless it's insightful. I mean, not insightful, but inciting. Okay, all right. So there are always, there's always these qualifications, and you see, there is no correct balance between individual rights and majority rule. That's what legislation is about. See, when you look at things like the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Civil Rights Act of 1964, amended in 72, or you will have others that you know about, that legislation in itself captures the balance that the legislature is thinking of, but it captures that balance not precisely, but in vague terms that are politically acceptable. Okay? Because the more specific you get in a legislation, the more likely it is it's going to be difficult to get enough support if it's if it's controversial, you need it. So that the legislation is vague, and then at the federal level, okay, then there is an administrative agency like the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that writes regulations and rules. The lawyers nodding, tell me when I'm wrong, okay, writes the rules, okay, that to try to implement, to try to give concrete, okay, guidance to those who are going to be subject to the law, and then the law is litigated, and then we go to court to see whether the administrative rules are consistent with the intent of the letter of the law and the intent of the law, and this will go on until the law matures. And now all we're doing is evaluating facts, not the meaning of the law itself. Okay? So you see how this tension goes on between them. So each of these values is important to building citizen investments in community and trust in elected officials, and you risk community solidarity if you ignore any of the values over time. Efficiency is one of 4 values if community building and building citizen investments in community is of value. Let me ask you a question too. Do you ever hear a federal representative or senator or a state representative or senator referring to the state or the federal government as a community? What level of government is community referred to? Local. This is really, to me, important. Because when you start, no, not you, but when you generically, when we start importing our political methods, our political approaches from state or federal, what we see at the state or federal, we're missing the idea, no. This is a community. You don't build community with us and them. You don't build community by focusing on people like us. You build community by building investments. Building investments so that people feel like they're part of something. And when people feel that they're part of something, you go from a compliance mindset, like complying with the law, that's my obligation, to an aspirational mindset. That's what I want. I want an aspirational mindset. And the only way we can do that is by looking at your city as community. Whatever that means, however complicated that is, and you can imagine in a larger place, really, really difficult, right? Okay. All right, now what I'd like to do is we're going to put this on hold, but we're going to show you a video, 10-minute video of what I call the cups, and it connects to the values, okay? Let's take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll do that. Hello, everybody. I'm John Nalbandian, retired from the University of Kansas, but still active in the public administration program there that focuses on educating students for careers in local government. I'm going to talk to you for just a few minutes today about something about community and model citizens, and also a metaphor of the cups. So let's get started. How many of you use the word community when you're describing the place that you live or work? Yeah, probably almost all of you, if not all of you, use that term. And when you do it, it implies something for me. It says to me, you have people living in your community, quote unquote, that I would consider model citizens. And what is a model citizen? A model citizen for me is not just people who are sort of prominent, or they're on like nonprofit boards, they're on commissions, they may give money, but it also includes volunteers. People who volunteer for Friends of the Library, people who volunteer for Boys and Girls Club, maybe the domestic violence shelter, people who volunteer at the hospital. You just go on and on. When you're an elected official like I was, you hear about, you meet these people all the time, and it actually gives you great pride in the community that you serve. So for me, a model citizen is a person who realizes that the quality of their life depends on more than what they can do for themselves, by themselves, and what they can do for their family in an isolated sense. It's more this sort of common phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. So let's assume that we have model citizens gathered, and we ask them, why do you do what you do? Well, they'd think about that for a minute, and then we get all kinds of responses. But there's one response that I want to focus on, and that's the response, I want to give something back to my community. Whoa, that's kind of interesting to me. And I think about it and I go, okay, so what's the difference between someone saying, I want to give something to you, and I want to give something back to you? Yeah, the idea of wanting to give something back implies that you received something, and now you're sort of repaying the debt. So the question is, what did these people receive from their life in this community that led them to believe they wanted to give something back? So clearly there are things like a good job and health care, things like that, but what about good education for their children? What about public safety? What about streets that get plowed when it snows? What about streets that don't have potholes so cyclists can ride on them? What about parks and rec and trails and programs? And what about a public library that just sort of gathers people for different events? What about clean water? What about wastewater that doesn't dump contaminates into the river? What about a stormwater system that doesn't flood the streets? Yeah, you know, all the things that you as public servants do contribute to this sense of the quality of a person's life. So here's now the metaphor of the cups. In my view, everybody is walking around with a cup. This cup contains the quality of their life. When the cup is filled and the cup starts to overflow, metaphorically, that's the point where a person says, I want to give some of this back. It's valuable, okay? So your job as public servants is to help fill people's cups. Okay, now some observations about the cup metaphor. First is the idea, I actually think that the number of people in your community who say, I want to give something back, is a measure, it's a performance measure. It's a measure of a community's resilience. It's a measure of a community's vitality. It's a measure of the vibrance and sort of the fabric of a community. Also, we can talk about the more cups that are filled, the more that we can think of citizens working from a mental picture that can focus on aspirations. So think about it. I mean, if a person's cup is not filled, can you actually engage them in community aspirations? I don't think so. I think the most you can expect from a person whose cup is not filled or is marginally filled is compliance, a compliance mindset. What other thoughts? First, no two cups are the same size. So some people are walking around with a cup the size of a thimble, and all it takes is a little bit, and they're in, okay? They're ready to give something back. And you know other people that are walking around with a vat. And no matter how much, how much goes in, they're not ready to give anything back. If community building is a goal, cups matter. And that leads to the political strategy or approach of negotiation and compromise, because you want to be careful about spilling cups. I mean, that's going to be inevitable in some decisions, but it's not something that you do quickly and without thought. So negotiation compromise is very important. The idea of us and them and winners and losers is not a concept of politics that is associated with community and community building. Okay, now a little humorous observation from my time on the city council here in Lawrence. First, if a council is faced with a tough decision, which basically means they're going to fill some people's cups, they're going to empty other people's cups, they're not really ready to do that, they're going to delay the decision. And you know the number one way of delaying a decision? That's right, asking staff for more information. Haven't you ever been in a situation where, I know you're smiling now, you've been in a situation where the council, you're just looking at the council and say, will they please make a decision? They've got all the information they need. But think about the cups. And then my last thought is, in a community without a genuine commitment to social justice, there actually are people who may not even have a cup. Now, to finish, what I'd like to do is I'd like to read you a poem. This poem is about the cups, and Melanie Gillies from the University of Virginia, the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Affairs, she wrote this after hearing me talk about the cups. I'm beginning to appreciate how tough it must be to be responsible for deciding public policy. What is acceptable politically while also administratively sustainable? Homegrown model citizens choose to actively express their gratitude, for their cups are overflowing to the point that they experience joy and satisfaction in giving back. Our jobs as public servants contributed to the quality of their lives and accumulated a debt they now recognize. Representation, individual rights, social equity, efficiency, the four conflicting values that underpin democracy. When no politically correct answer can be realized, the decision-making gravitates to negotiation and compromise. Recommendations based on cost and efficiency must be balanced by values and political viability. The right answer, no longer obvious if it empties cups. Thank you all very much. Thanks, Julia. The Cups video is available either on my website, goodlocalgovernment.org, or through YouTube, Nalbandian Cups, so you can do that as well. So we talked about values, and we talked about cups, and spilling cups, so on. What's the relationship between the value discussion and the cups discussion? Go ahead.
When you're talking about in the cups, sometimes you have to fill people's cups and empty others' cups, and so it's really the value proposition, I guess, is figuring out which of those values and what those hard decisions are that you have to make, because you know that there's going to have to be compromises and balancing between all those different values as you make that decision.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Steve. Other thoughts? Relationship between cups and values? really cups and value conflicts.
I saw it from a social equity point, perspective, that there are people that don't have cups, and we have to consider that when we're making decisions.
Yeah, that's one of the most sobering. I didn't have that in the original, and then somebody told me, say, John, some people don't even have cups. And they go, oh, okay, I get it. I don't really get it. I mean, I don't experience it, so I don't have that experience, but I can't imagine.
I get it.
Other thoughts? Yes.
I think it puts a human face and helps you really think about the individual citizens as opposed to this esoteric values kind of thing.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think when you look at it from the flip side of it, with those that don't have cups, I think that's a big part of what drives some of our violent crime when you talk about youth with firearms, and they literally don't even recognize what a cup is, because they don't foresee an opportunity, a future, or things along those lines. And until we can provide hope, identify the cup, and start putting some value in that cup, we're just going to continue on that spiral.
Is everybody's cup equal? Okay, why do you say no?
As you explained, some are marginally filled with people that will just comply, which goes to the chief's point, that you have some people that are motivated to give back because they have an overabundance of buy-in into city government, into the services. You feel like they have given you something to want to give back to. And then you have those that have been marginally provided for, and they're just here running with the program.
Yeah, okay, good. When you think of the city councilors, when you think of the decisions that you have to make, do you, I'm asking you to reveal something here, do you weigh each person's cup equally, or are some cups more important to you than others? Can we hear from some of the council? Yeah. Say.
Who are you talking to? Are you talking to council members?
Yes.
I don't think they're equal.
Okay, can you say more about that?
I care not to, but I don't. No.
Okay, all right. Yes.
Let me offer. Growing up, we had 3 dirt streets in our neighborhood, and we were like 3 or 4 blocks from the heart of downtown Chapel Hill, another university town. And every time my parents and neighbors heard they were paving streets or doing things in the city, they would sign the petitions or go downtown and try and get those streets. I was 25 years of age and had moved away when they finally paved those streets. So what guides me as far as when I look at decisions and choices and things is that thing of equity, realizing there are folks who don't necessarily have a voice, who don't have much in a cup, but yet who are still citizens and deserve to have that sense of equity as much as possible.
Great. Other council members want to weigh in here? Yes.
Well, yeah, and I think you have to recognize that all cups are not equal, but at the same time, when you're working with the different groups or neighborhoods who have people with cups, the people whose cup, or the neighborhood or the areas whose cups are full, you can't necessarily say, well, they don't need any more or have any interests that need to be addressed because their cups are already full.
Okay.
But yet at the same time, you are on the other side of that, you do recognize that there are those whose cups are not full, that you have to take that into consideration when you're making the decision.
Okay.
So, but yes, to answer your question, no, all cups, I don't see it.
Okay, great. Yeah, Commissioner Brown?
The cups as well are not equal because each community may present a different need or needs. Issues are different with constituents. And so I think when we're talking to constituents in terms of the cut they have, even if they didn't have a cup, there may be issues, there may be concerns. And one thing I thought about, Dr. John, was when you were talking about those who don't have a cup, this is what came in my head was, those who don't have cups do this. You know, if you put water in your hand, you have to drink that water as soon as you can, or eventually you're going to lose it. So if I'm dealing with someone that does not have a cup and got an urgent need and have their hand out, I, as a council member, should try to mitigate that problem as soon as I can, because after a while,
Oh,
you're gonna.
interesting. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. Yeah.
You know, being one of those people, a couple of us on council grew up without cups. But we were fortunate enough to have people help us find a cup and start filling it up. And I know we've got something before us now. We were talking about bus routes the other day.
Yeah.
And I had no transportation up until I was about 17, 18 years old. And, you know, that weighs heavy on me because I'm thinking about those people that when we cut those 2 bus routes out on Sundays, they've got to walk further to a bus stop. They got to stand on a bus stop in the rain on a day like today and things like that. So I always try to, and I think all 7 of us try to weigh, you know, everybody's cup and, you know, what situation you're in. And we try to make the best decision possible for the biggest group of people.
Okay.
I don't know if it's Star Wars or something, but something about the benefit to the many outweigh the something to the individual.
Star Trek.
Yeah. What was that?
Star Trek.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, because this is very emotional for me. But we have discussions, and I'm probably going to make some people mad at me. But we have discussions about.
I bet you haven't done that before.
Yes, I have. We have discussions about poverty.
Yeah.
And for the most part, a lot of people sit there and never open up their mouths about how to deal with poverty. And that really concerns me, that there are some people who maybe haven't had to deal with poverty,
Right.
that really don't say anything about it. And so that's when I say, no, it's not, you know, because I'm sitting here wondering, why, except for one did the other day ask, but why aren't you asking questions about this? Why are you sitting here like it's not a concern to you, when in essence it's a concern for our community?
Okay.
And that's
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. What I would say is that you as individual council members, you have constituencies. You have the city as a whole, of course, but you probably have more individualized constituencies as well. And I'll talk about this a little later, but you always have to weigh your obligation to, quote unquote, the people who voted for you, your constituency, who you're sympathetic to, with the greater good. Okay? That's just part of your challenge. In many ways, the way that you individually order the values, okay, they're not all equal to all of us. You have and it can vary on different issues as well. But I think the way that you weight the values also has something to do with whose cups you think are most important to you, or that you're going to respond to. I don't say necessarily important, but who you're going to respond to, right? Now, I'll tell you a story. I knew, as a council member, I knew that if I said no to the Chamber of Commerce, okay, that it would spill if I was in a majority, okay, it would spill their cup, but not like this. It might tip it a little bit, okay? But they're in the game. They're not leaving the playing field, okay? They are invested. So I knew I could say no to them It may have a consequence on me, but it would not have a substantial consequence long term on them because they're invested in the game. And if I said no, all they might say is, we're not voting for you next time. They wouldn't say, we're going home. There are some people and groups who, if you say no to, they're going home and not coming back. Symbolically. I mean, I'm not literal here, but symbolically. And so the relationship to me between the values and the cups is very complicated because the values are they're not equal in our minds. If they were equal for all of us, then it would make no difference who you voted for to be your representative. I mean, think about it. If everybody had exactly the same values, right? You just go with majority rule, I guess, then. But, so this becomes quite, it's complicated, and that's why the standards that we use to evaluate the work of a council, we have to be very careful of avoiding the standards, the same standards we use to evaluate like an administrative task force. Okay? I mean, you have an administrative task force, it may be, or a committee, it's like, here's what we're supposed to do, okay, here's the expertise that we know who we're supposed to listen to, we know who to invite to the meeting, so on and so forth, but they're not necessarily dealing with cups and not necessarily dealing with conflicting values. You as council members are dealing with both, and that's why it is so challenging, not only individually, but then collectively, which is what I want to talk about next. Okay? Yes?
I wanted to just offer a thought that came to my mind.
Go ahead.
About that. I like the metaphor of the cups, but I would say that maybe my understanding of it is maybe broader than what we've just gone through with whether they're equal or whether we value them equally. And what I would say about that is that the cup is really is your capacity, and so what you've been discussing is building capacity and whether someone had capacity at all, or how much capacity they had and whether they thought they had enough to give back. And so what I would offer is that this filling of cups is not just the role of government, but we have many, many, many organizations and units, lots of folks who will be building capacity, who will help us. And when I think of myself and whose cup runneth over, and the reason I'm here is because my cup runneth over and I want to give back. And how did I get that capacity? How did I get such a full cup? Well, I was educated in the public schools of Hampton, Virginia. You know, I had a wonderful family, a great church, wonderful education, all those things. And so, you know, some of that was the opportunity that my city gave me, but some of it was also other actors and other organizations.
Right. And I think I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think it really is important when we look at people's cups. It's not one person or one entity that's having an effect on a person's cup, right? I mean, you have all the private sector, you've got the nonprofit sector, and so on and so forth. And so what has happened is that when we look at the role, especially the role of local government now, we look at it in terms of a provider, right? Providing services. But now it goes beyond that. Now we talk about local government not only as a provider, but as an enabler. Okay? So when you fund, for example, you fund a nonprofit, whatever, and the nonprofit does the business, it has the effect of influencing people's cups, you become an enabler, all right? But you are enabling the provision of services. Now I want to go on a little bit of a sidebar here. Let me just go on a sidebar here, because I want to take this enabling, if the enabling function resonates with you, I want to take it a step further, okay? I believe that in every community there are organizations, entities that I would call anchor institutions. These are organizations that have roots that are deeply embedded in the community. So they are looked to for stability, even if it's not tangible, okay? But they've been there, you recognize them as pillars. Okay, we think of pillars of the community as individuals, but I want to think of pillars as organizations or entities themselves. So they have roots that we can, in a way, so they're roots that anchor the resilience. But they are more than the roots. They have horizontal branches. And these branches reach out, okay? And they reach out to connect. And they connect, in some cases, with other anchor institutions. So, for example, in Lawrence, we have the library, we have the Arts Center, and we have the Museum of History. And they actually are geographically configured in a triangle in our downtown. And I refer to them as the triangle of community. Because not only do they reach down, but increasingly they are reaching out. Okay? As they reach out, the question is, are they reaching out to common, to reinforce common interests? Or are they reaching out to increasingly diverse entities? So, for example, is the Arts Center and the library, they're doing joint programs. I love it, okay? Now what I want to know is, have they reached out to 9th Street Baptist Church? Have they reached out to Luke's AME Church? The black churches that are anchors in that community, all right? Now I come back, I'm yelling again. Now I come back to the enabling function. See, are they enabling community building? Are they enabling inclusion? See, and that's, so now now when I think of the enabling function, I think about it as more as enabling the provision of services. I think about, are you enabling community by reaching out with your branches and using your credibility to reach out to diversity, whatever that diversity is, okay, to strengthen, all right? And in effect, what you're doing is trying to enable community resilience. See, and see, this is something that I'm just kind of mulling over. Because what I want is, community resilience is not fixed. Community resilience can grow or it can decline. And in my mind, there are issues that communities face that exceed their political capacity to deal with them. In Lawrence, Kansas, we had an initiative by the State Transportation Department to build a bypass, okay? And the bypass, however, would go through Baker Wetlands, which is environmentally sensitive area, okay? It would go by Haskell Indian Nations University, where there are sacred grounds, burial grounds. It took us 25 years to come to grips with how could we route that thing? How could we accommodate the differences so that we could actually get this done? That problem exceeded our political capacity, okay? And so when I think of local governments and I think of part of what you are doing, you are building capacity, okay? And so that's why it's like I look at like these individual constituent service kinds of things, you know, and I go, okay, fine, you got to do that, but that, and this really, you know, constituent services are really interesting to me because we used to have a council member, it was like the people's council member, right? He had a job, his job was with a newspaper, advertising newspaper, local thing, and he used to walk down Massachusetts Street to all the businesses, and so he used to be the you know, he would come to council meeting and say, well, I heard on the street this, that, and so on and so forth, you know? I mean, okay. Virtually nobody ever called me as a council member. See, I realize that if you don't know me, I'm not approachable. Because I look like this. You know? And so I didn't get the phone calls, you know? But, you know, I was elected first. I was elected second out of 12 people my first term. I was elected first in my re-election. So obviously, you know, people saw something, but it wasn't necessarily the constituent services. So I remember one time I had a call and from a citizen. I said, well, I'll call the manager. Let me call the manager. So I called the manager and told him what it was. And he said, okay, we'll look into it. We'll take care of it. And then he said, do you want me to call you back and let you know what we've done so that you can call the citizen? Okay? Yeah, right? You know what I said? No. Not interested. Okay? If you can take care of it, just call him, tell him you took care of it. All right? But see, you have different council members, different talents, right? Okay. All right, let's see, what time is it? I guess we should do Babcock. Yeah. Okay, now what I'd like to do is give you a case study to work on. And I'd like to, may I borrow this piece? This is a brochure that Julia and I put together, okay? And you have it, and what I want to do is I just want to show you what's in this brochure. I can share. So on the first page is our thoughts on the ideal governing body member. On page 2 is governance roles. Sorry, that's page 3, I guess. On the next page are the values. You see how the values, and then the bullet points. The bullet points are what I call everyday examples of everyday expressions of the values. Because what I wanted to suggest is that when people talk about the values, they don't necessarily use these terms. But embedded in their conversation it could be the values. Okay? So we got the 4, and then I wrote these everyday examples one night at a council member when I was getting bored. And you got bored at a council meeting? Are you kidding me? Oh my God, tell me the number of times. Especially when some of you keep talking about the same thing you've talked about over and over and over again. Oh my God, really? Okay, on the oh, you don't do that. I know you guys don't do that. On the next page is, this is what we're going to talk about, the politics administration mindsets. We're going to talk about that. And then we've got some other things here as well. On the back, obstacles to effective governance. So what we're going to do now is a case study having to do with the values. So you may want to refer, if you need to, refer to this page. And you already gave it out, Julia?
Yes.
Okay.
Scenario 1 is on the page. There might not be one for everyone, but you all can share together.
Okay, so you have yeah. So what I want you to do at your table is take a look at the first scenario, and then, may I see that just for a second? And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 bullet points. See if you can get through each of the bullet points, okay? And just about 15 minutes on this because we got 2 other scenarios to go with this as well. So go ahead and just at your table, spend some time looking at this.
Discuss the 4 questions at the table.
Once you've read it and have some thoughts on it, I want you to talk about it at your table, okay?
Because of that lapses.
By the way, this case occurred before there were pedestrian activated crosswalks. So it's just 2 lines across the street. That's what we're talking about. 2 white lines across the street. Once this is done, she gives it to the city. Oh.
I'm a city reporter.
Oh, okay.
Hampton. I don't know into a story or yet, or anything, but it's kind of interesting. And you used to be a councilman yourself.
I can get a card.
And so if you talk about having crossing the light, they're saying you'll cross.
He would say staff did not adequately perform its job because they didn't come forward with a different and that's a you have to think bigger than just the numbers. Not the political piece of it so much, but or at least not in those terms, but you gotta think about how this community is gonna be impacted by whatever decision you make.
Because, again, in situations that we've all heard about, they do nothing, somebody crosses the street, a person hit by a car, killed,
Right, that's and that's you need X number of people. And there's so maybe they didn't have it all before.
Fast and they get a call, so you all were saying you need more study.
what adjustments can be made that are outside of those standards. Missing
Senior citizens, and the money's not really there, so you try to find another way to do it because they ask for it. Sometimes you just, if you can do it, it costs a lot of money, it's going to make people happy.
I would probably some other
Right, so the negative part is listening to those, you're saying not to do it. So they're just in line with the
Now together.
Thank you.
But this just says it doesn't, it gives a false sense of safety. It didn't say this was
But I think there's a whole lot more information that needs to go into the calculation.
I think one of the things too is that the letter was referred to the Traffic Safety Commission, and those are a group of citizens appointed by council. And they clearly weren't given enough information to make an informed decision on, but they didn't ask the questions that we're asking now. They accepted these
Okay, you want to wrap it up? Okay, so let's do this as a large group. Anybody can raise their hand and speak here. Is this a 2 + 2 problem?
No.
Is it a 2 + 2 problem to the engineer?
Yes.
Okay? I mean, I think, we're drawing stark differences here, but nevertheless, I think it's really important to understand that there are these different perspectives. Okay, so if this is not 2 + 2, then there are questions of values. So where is the value of representation expressed in the case? Anybody?
They're the concerns of the senior citizens.
Sure. All right. So the concerns of senior citizens, and then also we have a neighborhood association that supported the request, and so there's that weighing in as well. Value of efficiency.
That's the traffic engineer.
Right. The traffic engineers view the manual and uniform traffic safety. Who knows what that is, by the way? Yeah, tell us what it is.
Well, it used to be a book. It's not a book anymore. But it's the national standards for based on statistical analysis of speed limits and accident rates, and so that's the Bible which they go to for determining all of those things.
Yeah. Okay. So, we've had cases, I remember we had a case where people wanted a stop sign, and the traffic engineer says, it's not justified. If you put up a stop sign where it's not warranted, eventually people are going to look at it more as a yield sign than a stop sign. People are going to make up the speed that they're losing on the street, so on and so forth. Okay? All right. Value of equity, is there an equity issue here?
Yes.
Yes? How is it expressed?
Well, it's expressed in people who live in subsidized housing,
Okay.
people who, senior citizens, people who have been previously ignored by city government.
Okay.
I think that's it.
All right, thank you.
And the editorial, which has said senior citizens in the community have been neglected, so it's time to start doing.
Okay, all right, this is important. Now I want to say something about the equity concern because it's so, elevated in our consciousness these days. How many of you are left-handed? 1, 2.
That would make sense.
Okay, here's what we know about these two. We have discriminated against them all their lives. Okay? How many of you use a can opener? Is it made for right-handers or left-handers? Right-handers. How many of you use the scissors? Is it made for right-handers or left-handers? How many of you have seen those desks at schools that are...
I was left-handed when I was a kid, but I went to Catholic school and they made me.
Whoa! Whoa! So here's what we know, is that we have discriminated against left-handed people all their lives, okay? Now, does anybody care?
I care.
The only people who care are left-handed people. And they may not even care at this point, okay? So we have discriminated against them all their lives, but it doesn't rise to the level of political concern. Why not?
Because they don't complain about it.
Because they don't complain?
They're not organized in great numbers. If there was a left-handed riot, we would care.
Also because we have the minority voice, and if we're looking at majority rules, then we wouldn't be represented in the conversation to appeal to our interests.
Okay.
And we're not a legally protected class.
That's right.
So you're not a protected class, and you're not a protected class because your political weight is not reflected in whether you're left-handed or right-handed. See, that's the key. When you read, if you read the preamble to the Americans with Disabilities Act, it is so clear where they talk about why they're doing this. And they say, this is a discrete, insular minority that has been discriminated against all their lives. Okay? See, and discriminated against meaning they haven't had the same opportunities for political involvement that the rest of us have had. See, that's the key. Political power is the key when we look at that. Okay, are there individual rights here? Do people have a right to cross the street safely? Yes. They do? Do you have an ordinance that says that? No. Do you as an individual have a right to cross I-64, Interstate 64 anytime you want? Oh, you've got all the examples of people who have tried to exercise their discretion, crossing the street. See, rights are so important and in our society that in order to make an argument, we invent them. So instead of saying you have the discretion to cross the street, we say we have a right to cross the street. See, people use the term we have a right all the time, even though they, because they're borrowing. See, they're borrowing the credibility that it comes from a legal right, okay? Nevertheless, all right. Has staff adequately performed its job in preparation of the item coming to the council? Okay, so here's another way to look at this, which is in terms of precedent. See, how have similar requests been treated? So if in the past it's common that the request goes to the city engineer or traffic engineer, whatever, goes to the Traffic Safety Commission. If the Traffic Safety Commission votes on it unanimously, it goes on the city's consent agenda, okay, and it's just, voted as part of the consent agenda. If that's the precedent, then I personally don't have any problem with them not spending the time to come up with more information, more alternatives. However, if they knew or should have known that this was going to be like a hot topic, then they should have provided more information. In any case, I think they're going to have to now at this point. What factors would you consider if you were a council member?
I would want to know, do we have an opportunity to talk to the residents who are, asking for this and why it was important to them?
Good, yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't cost a lot to put 2 stripes on the street, so I would certainly have a conversation with them.
Okay, all right. Yes.
Yes, but putting 2 stripes on the street is not going to be safe. No.
Yeah,
Really, what the answer is probably or potentially, if I had more information, and I realize I'm speculating, but I accept that putting a crosswalk in that location is probably creating a more dangerous situation for the people who are asking for it. What they really need is a different kind of traffic control, whether that's a crosswalk, whether that's a light, whether that's some other kind of signaling. I don't know what that answer is. But it's not, I don't think you can just say throw 2 stripes on the street and that's the answer, because that's cheap. And you're right,
Yeah.
It is, but I don't think with what we have on this, that's
Right.
the right answer.
Okay, but I thought you said you wanted to talk to them. All right, what would you talk to them about?
I would ask them about their concerns, why is it necessary to have this done? Certainly, I think when you mentioned we have a right to cross the street, I know we have a right to cross the street safely. I think it's assumed that when I cross the street, I'm going to be cautious enough to look both ways, and make an intelligent decision when I should cross or not. But when I say stripes, doesn't cost much. There's a lot of consideration to that too.
Okay.
It's basically, what does this community want? And consider this too.
Okay.
They vote. I don't care if they're subsidized housing or where they live. They're voters. They're constituents.
Yeah.
So I think they should be listened to.
Okay. I got to hold something in my head, which is not a very good probability, but nevertheless, I want to say something to you a little later. All right. So what do you think the council ought to do at this point?
They should send it back and ask for some more information.
Ask for more information, okay? Heaven forbid, more information.
Ready? Okay. Phase 2, same rules.
I'm sorry.
I think 2 things should happen, actually. I think, one, it says the council hasn't had any kind of communication with them. So I think council should go out.
Yeah.
But not only go out, but take someone from the traffic division, and let's talk about what could work.
Okay.
Not just the crosswalk, because we actually have a real-life situation
Yeah.
in Hampton. And Chieftain has another example, but there's a situation where there's senior housing, 2 senior housing areas, and they want to be able to cross King Street, and they requested a crosswalk. And traffic
No kidding.
has said that it's not safe
No.
to do it there because of proximity to another light.
Yeah.
But they still want to be able to cross
Okay.
safely. And I think there needs to be a conversation with council as well as
Okay.
with traffic management to say what can be done. to
Okay.
be safe.
Okay, good. Take a look at scenario 2 and go ahead and discuss that at your table. Here's what we're talking about. That's scenario 1. When they're done, you can get scenario 2. Oh, did you get it? Okay. Oh, you're all set. Oh, you have scenario 3? No. Oh, okay.
I don't know how long I'm staying because I have another story to write.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just-
Okay.
Actually, do you have 2 seconds? Yeah. Just
It seems to me that all of our jobs is to try to find solutions. Sometimes you can't. This seems like one that you probably could find some solution. But if you keep looking at the same.
Here's the scenarios that we looked at. Here's the pros and cons, and the reason why we think this does what it does. And so if that was done as part of this, probably accurate.
Yeah, and there would be 3 or 4 options with the pros and cons.
I guess it's like, well, that really does.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. It does not sound like there's one. You went back to the public works director.
To me, always seem to be even worse. But people don't go to the particular location and cause, as opposed to just walking across the street anywhere doing it all. That's part of the
Primary issue. And so, like you're saying, you did consult with police, one of the
and that can make it dangerous as opposed to you actually taking the precaution of sitting the traffic because they didn't judge you whether or not you can make it. And I think that's the concern that it will
Some attention to solving that problem, because they can't solve it otherwise.
It has a note here that no pedestrian activated crosswalks were developed, crosswalks were simply designated, so that implies they added that, John, or was that
What?
already there?
They were suggesting that, and he said, that's all exists. There's no pedestrian. He
Were
said,
there
this time
already
they don't exist.
crosswalks there?
No.
We were confused by this note here.
That was a suggestion, but they don't exist. So all you can have for a crosswalk is just the 2 lines.
Yeah.
But that was already there?
No,
That's
there's
at this time,
nothing.
as far as what is possible.
Yeah.
Is just the 2 white lines, versus there being a button activated. where you
Oh,
can-
you mean historically
Yeah.
those weren't available at the time? I got you. I was confused. I'm thinking it had
Yeah.
happened in the story.
No.
I guess the point being that that might have been an alternative that they would have thought.
Today
of
it
if
would-
they had it,
today
but they
it's-
didn't have the technology.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
Okay, so let me have your attention and let's talk about this a little bit. Has staff adequately fulfilled its role at this point?
It depends.
On what, Terry?
I think it depends on whether the role that staff has played as described in this aligns with the community's values about what that process should entail.
Say more.
So for example, in Hampton, there is a long-standing community value and expectation around community engagement and participation in the work of local government. And if I were to perform this task the way on the surface it's described here, I would not have done my job the way it was supposed to be done. I also know from talking to my colleagues around the state and country that there are communities where the way I would be expected to do this is not the way they're.
Okay. All right, how about others of you? Has staff adequately fulfilled its role at this point? Yes?
I think another sort of question that we discussed was, another thing that we do is we say, here are your options. And it's not clear here as to whether they did that and said, and sort of outlined, here are your options, here's kind of the pros and cons of each of those options.
Okay.
And so that we can properly evaluate and make
Okay.
a balance between
Good.
What the community wants and
Okay.
safety.
At this point, what would staff want from the council?
They want the council to tell them whether to do it or not.
Direction.
Who said the direction? Direction. Okay? I'll get to this too, but direction is the key here. Steve?
But the direction that staff is asking for is based on staff recommendations, whether they've done their due diligence. A lot of times when we have the question from staff, we say, can you bring us back a report, blah, 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 to help us make the best decision we can make. But all this says was from staff was there was no alternative. Couldn't do it.
You don't think that's possible?
Yes and no.
Mary?
Yes and no.
That'd be a tough call in Hampton.
It would be.
Really?
Yes, sir.
What would you do in Hampton? You're going to spend more and more time on this?
I can tell you, yeah, we spend a lot of time on things like that.
Okay. All right, I want to get to that.
On the staff piece, I mean, and this maybe amplifies on what Terry and Brian were saying, but to be explicit, there's no indication that the staff has ever met with the senior citizens.
Okay.
To have a dialogue and to help them understand that they're concerned that their safety may be more at risk and
Yes.
explore the alternatives.
Yeah.
At the what is staff expecting? To be perfectly frank, I think the traffic engineer in this scenario is expecting council to back him,
Right.
not just make a decision.
Yeah.
Because the traffic engineer is thinking, I'm doing everything right. I'm following the manual.
Right.
I have the best interest of the citizen at heart. I know more about this topic, et cetera, et cetera. And they don't mean that in a negative way, but that's the mentality of,
Okay.
I'm doing the right thing for the right reasons based upon the professional training I've got, and therefore,
Yes.
council should back me up on this.
Yes. And you are jeopardizing the safety of these residents by complying with their will. Furthermore, what you are doing is you are setting a precedent. So now, should we now, as staff, it's like anytime a group requests a crosswalk, if they have sufficient political will, attention, we're supposed to put in a crosswalk. Does that also apply to traffic signals? Do we put in traffic signals wherever you want traffic signals? Okay, I'm just arguing, okay? The counterpoint.
That's what we hear as department heads.
Yes.
Decisions are made from lower
Yes.
staff because there's
Yeah.
not that understanding of the political environment.
Yes. Okay, now, I want to raise a couple of things with you. The first is, your conversations with the residents that I've heard you say we need to talk to more about the residents is about this. See, it's about this. All right, wait, just let me just, I just need to. What you have not done, see, you now as council, you're getting down here. All right? You have taken the definition of the problem as given. It says explicitly in scenario 2, it says here, during the course of the conversation, you read between the lines and you discover that for these elderly residents, their self-respect and dignity are tied to their sense of independence and mobility. When you meet with them, why aren't you talking about that? That's this. See, why aren't you thinking, oh, what if This is just an example of how senior citizens throughout the community are feeling about their opportunities for mobility. What if you said, look we're taking this as a traffic engineering problem. What if instead we look at it as a social service problem? Why the heck can't the church send a little bus over there on Sunday mornings? Why can't the Dairy Queen deliver? Okay, now the question, I'm yelling again, I know, I can't help it. All right, now the question is, who should raise those questions?
Governing body.
You say the governing body, and I'm going to say, if the staff is moving into the gap, I would not think it beyond their scope to raise the issue. Now, do I expect the traffic engineer to do that? No, I don't. But that then raises the question of how do we expand the disciplinary boundaries within which we're looking at this problem? See, and that's where the gap, that's the gap thing. Instead of looking this way, we're looking this way, and where somebody has to say, this is a social service issue. Maybe it's an example of something bigger. Maybe we can get transit involved. Maybe there's just a volunteer who could write it, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you get it? All right, I'm just raising that. I don't know, this actually is partially a case. Do we have scenario 3?
We do.
I'm going to tell them wait to turn it over at the same time, right? Because it happens real quick, right?
Oh, yeah.
Don't turn it over till we say. This is always challenging with adults. You're not really trustworthy.
See, we all missed the getting in the weeds.
Okay, go.
Okay, so unfortunately, this actually did happen. Teresa Knight, 84, was killed crossing the street while we were in process of trying to deal with this issue. We never did get to that higher level that I was talking about. We were still at the crosswalk, street light, the technical solution. We never did look at it as a social service issue. That's only my post-reflection. There now is a traffic signal at 17th and Massachusetts. Okay? See, now the question is, what is the role of staff at this point after Teresa Knight gets killed? What is staff's role? What did you say? What did you say? Get out of the way. Just get out of the way. This is not a staff issue anymore. This is an issue of how will the community as a whole regard what will be done in light of her death. Okay? All right? Okay, So anyway, just so I like to do this just to illustrate, the values, and it leads us into the last segment of the workshop, which is the idea, the second path to political astuteness. So the first is understanding the values and the complexity of the values. The second is the mindsets. So realizing that as elected officials, you're wearing political lenses. As administrative staff, you're wearing administrative lenses, and you're seeing the world through that light. So now what I'd like to do is talk about the mindset. So what I've done here is I've created these two columns that I've created these two columns of politics and administration, and labeled it political acceptability, administrative sustainability. And I have characteristics here, and then so we've got the characteristics here, what I'm going to look at, and then the politics and administration differences. I've drawn these differences starkly, okay? In practice, there's more flow and less of the differences. But what I want to do is I want to go through some of these. I won't go through all of them, but I want to go through some of them to illustrate the different way of thinking about the problem. So on the political side, the first thing I want to talk about is politics as the allocation of values. And what I mean by that is taking those four values and actually the law, the ordinances, in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, this is much more true at the state and federal, but as those ordinances reflecting the importance of the various values. So David Easton is a noted political scientist back in the day, and he actually defined politics as the authoritative allocation of values. Authoritative meaning in the law, okay? However, to some extent, if you want to understand politics, you have to look at it as a game. Now, when I say game, I don't mean fun and games. What I mean is it is an activity that has its own rules. The rules are not written down, so it's kind of hard to learn them, okay? But nevertheless, there are, quote unquote, rules of the game. So for example, one rule of the game is let go of issues. After it's been decided, let go of it. Don't keep reminding the council, okay? I'm talking about council members that talking to each other. Don't keep reminding your colleagues, because after a while, what your colleagues do is they don't listen to you, okay? Second, you don't have to speak on every issue. I know this one is a hard one to believe. But how often do you have business meetings?
Twice a month.
Twice a month, okay? So we had them every week. Okay, so that's like 50 a year. So in a 4-year term, that's like 50 times 4, 200. How many meetings do you think it takes before a citizen gets a sense of who you are? Does it take 200? No. So why are you speaking on every issue? I mean, if you don't have anything to say, don't say it. I mean, why don't you just say, I agree with Councilmember Brown? Why do you have to repeat what Councilmember Brown said? We were on TV too, so it wasn't a matter of, people knew who talked and people know who didn't talk, all right? Another one. Realize that respect is the key to your influence as a council member. And respect depends upon you using your talents in ways that other council members value. See, you are going to, see, one of the really interesting things is the working conditions, the conditions under which council works. So think about staff, the conditions which staff works on. You have a job description, okay? You have a supervisor. You have performance appraisals. Okay, you have a, now, does the council have a job description? No. Okay. Does the council have a supervisor? No. Does the council have a performance appraisal other than an election? Which means, you know, who knows what that means? No. Do you see the vagueness? In that kind, now you have Robert's Rules of Order. But see, Robert's Rules of Order, I mean, really, actually, Robert's Rules of Order is designed to substitute for hierarchy, okay? But Robert's Rules of Order works better in a complex situation, you know, like in England where they have 70-member councils. You know, okay, we need some procedures for here. But when you got 7 people, it gets serious. You know, how much do you really need? All right. So when you are confronted with this level of ambiguity, what you do is, naturally, what people do is they rely on the strengths that they have built up over the years that bring them success. So, for example, if you're a data person, all right, and you get on the council, what are you going to ask for? Data. If you're an action person and you're on the council, what are you going to ask for? Now, if you're an action person and you're on the council with a data person, okay, do you see the issue? So you have talents that will bring you, in your mind, success. But your respect depends on whether others see those talents as adding value. Okay? All right, here's one that's sort of a hard one to accept, but I know it's true. Everyone has a right to speak. Nobody has a right to be listened to. All right? You have to earn respect in order for people to listen to you. So the highest form of respect is if another council member at a meeting says, Vice Mayor Craig, what do you think about this? Think about that. See? I mean, this is, you know, Councilmember Hobbs, what are you thinking about this? See, this is your business meeting, all right? And so who are you speaking to? That's what somebody reminded me of. This is a council's business meeting. Talk to the other council members. You've got hundreds of meetings if you've got a 4-year term. You know, you got so many meetings where people are going to be able to draw their conclusions about who you are, how effective you are, what you stand for, and so on and so on. You don't have to pay attention to the other council members and their respect. Okay? All right. Look at staff. Do we use the metaphor, the game of administration? We talk about the game of politics, right? That's sort of a metaphor that we use. That's the game of politics. How often do you hear the term the game of administration? No. Administration is not a game. I put that in quotes, okay? Administration is not a game. Administration is problem solving. And that's why when you ask staff, what is the most important thing you need from the council? And they will say, direction. Okay? Why? Because you cannot deploy your problem-solving skills and talents unless you know what the heck are we supposed to be working on. Okay? All right. And that's why, now you see, they need the direction, but here's the council playing with cups and values. I can't give you direction now because if I do, I'm going to spill some cups that are really, really bad idea. Okay? I need some time. No, we need direction. I need time. We need to give us more information. Oh God, okay. Whatever. All right? You see, but you see how that mindset, how it really needs to be understood. See, if you're going to be in that gap, you got to understand these kinds of things. Okay, let's look at the players. Over here on the administrative side, we have experts who are engaging in problem solving with a trustee mentality. All right? So if you are, if you're a financial trustee of a child, okay, all right, and the child wants you to spend some money, do you always say yes? No, because you are charged as a trustee with acting in the interests of the client, of the child, in this case, all right? So the trustee mentality is looking at the bigger picture. That's the trustee mentality. That bigger picture is oftentimes defined by the discipline, all right, within which the administrative staff comes from. But nevertheless, there is the trustee perspective. The players on the political side are trustees, but you're also representatives. Meaning, think in terms of customer service representatives. You are expected to facilitate, right, the problems that individuals or groups come to you with, but you're also responsible for looking at the greater good. So when are you supposed to do one as opposed to the other? I have no idea. But see, that's where the talent, that's where you know who you are as an individual. See, now, when I was in Manhattan Beach, California doing this, and one of the council members said, okay, here's the difference. If you see the individual, the constituent, if you see that individual as a customer, your job is customer service representative. Okay? If you see the resident as an owner of the community, then you are a trustee. So the way you think about that, and of course you're involved in both. Now, on the player side, you are going to find it very easy on the political side. You're going to find it very easy to get down here. And like I said before, if you're down here, who's up here? All right? You're going to find it very easy to get down there. Now, let's talk about knowledge, skills, and abilities. You are going to deal with problems that can be technically complex. you are going to be given staff reports that may be complex as well. So the question is, what knowledge, skills, and abilities are required in order for you to run for office? None, right? So how can it be that you are expected to understand the complexities of issues when no knowledge, skills, and abilities are required in order to hold the office? Something's wrong with that scenario. And the scenario, what's wrong with the scenario is you are not expected to understand the issue the way staff can understand the issue. You are expected to understand and to weigh the consequences of the choices that are presented to you. That's what you are elected to do. And the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are required are limited to, can you understand the consequences? If you cannot understand the consequences, we're in big trouble, okay? So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a problem with your shoulder, all right? And it's quite painful to get from here to here, and it's very, very much excruciatingly painful to get from here and here, but you can do it, all right? You go to the doctor who, you go to the doctor who refers you to an expert who will, you believe, will act on your behalf, correct? I mean, if you think the doctor is self-interested, you're in trouble, right? You want to believe that that doctor is acting in your interests, all right? So you go to the general practitioner refers you to an orthopedic surgeon. The orthopedic surgeon says you need an MRI. You get the MRI. By the way, has anybody actually read the results of an MRI? Okay, I read the results of an MRI. They did a brain scan on me to see if I was as smart as I thought I was, and then I saw the paragraph that the radiologist or whoever, cardiologist read. This is the truth. I did not understand a single noun or verb. That was one medical doctor talking to another medical doctor. And I realized at that point, my gosh, the translation that they must have to go through in order for me to understand what it is that's going on is incredible, okay? So the MRI comes back and you talk to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, here's what your MRI shows. You've got a rotator cuff problem. We can do two things. I can give you some meds, and what they will do is it will stabilize your condition. So the pain, I know the pain is significant, but it will not get any worse. Okay, so I can stabilize the condition. Alternatively, we can do an operation. Now, if we do an operation, it will eliminate all pain, but you will lose mobility from here to here. Do you understand your choices? Then you say, can I get a second opinion? Okay? And the doc says, yes, you can get a second opinion, but 95 out of 100 docs who look at your situation will recommend the two alternatives that I have given you, and the other 5 you do not want to do business with. See, this is 2 + 2 for the doc. See, 2 + 2 for the doc. And then you say, what do you think I ought to do? Now what does the doctor say? I haven't got a clue what you should do. Now, why would the doctor say, I don't know what you should do? The doctor won't say that, but in his or her heart, he said, you know. So why would the doctor say, I don't know what you should do?
He doesn't know your pain threshold.
Wait, say?
He doesn't know your pain threshold.
He doesn't know your pain threshold?
He's giving you the consequences, and you have to choose which consequence you want.
Okay, tell me about the operation.
He could explain to you the full operation, but as long as you understand what the consequences are, you don't have to understand the mechanics of it.
And there you go. See, and there you go. See, and so this is, see, there's a lesson here. There is a lesson here in staff reports. See, and the expectation of staff of the council. If you expect staff to understand the issue the way that you do, it's too much. No, because then what it's doing is detracting from what they are elected to do, which is which consequences are more important to the way I look at this community, to the constituents that I have, to those who voted for me, to my role both as a representative and my role as a trustee. Now, you as council members are in fact both advantaged and disadvantaged because of your prior work for cities. Right? It's so easy for you to dive down. You know, give me my diving gear, I'm getting down in there. All right? But the point is, when you get down there, who's up here? Okay? All right? Next. The conversation. What do you know versus what do you hear? What do you know invites data, plans, and reports. Okay? All right. Now, I want your passion. I want your commitment, but it will not substitute for data, plans, and reports. You got to be able to do that work. Okay? On the other hand, for the elected official, it's not about data, plans, and reports. It's about passion, dreams, and stories. Now, I don't mean that you as an elected official have to be passionate, have dreams and stories, but that is in my mind, when we contrast politics and administration, this has to play itself out in some way. So let me show you. So the passion, I know the city manager in Des Moines told me one time, he said passion, that's the reason I have it up here, he said passion, it enlivens the process. See, it gets us going, all right? The dreams are what capture the aspirations, see? And the stories convey the values, all right? Because we need all of those. Now, you as a council member don't have to be passionate, you don't have to have dreams, and you don't have to have compelling stories. One of the guys who was a political advisor to me, and had really great political knowledge, and he said to me one time when I hadn't been in office yet, and I was running, and he said, John, I'm going to tell you something, don't take it bad, but there are times when you're going to be up there on the dais, and you are on the dais, aren't you? Raised dais? Yeah, you got to let people know you're important, don't you? Yeah. So there are times when you are going to open your mouth and you will be no more than a ventriloquist dummy. Okay, Dan, what is that supposed to mean? I'm a university faculty member. I'm nobody's dummy, okay? He said, no, you don't get it. He said, you're going to talk to enough people and you're going to hear what is said, that there are times when an issue comes up that you will open your mouth, you will use your own words, but their sentiment will be expressed. Okay? So let me tell you a story. So this was the first time I was running for office. So it was 90. Yeah, elected in 91. So we're running for office, and I got an invitation to come to a coffee for a group of neighbors, in a particular neighborhood, whose children were swimmers. Okay? They belonged to a group called the Aqua Hawks, which is a club, and so on and so forth. And they wanted to talk to me about the opportunities that their kids had, or in this case, that they didn't have. And their concern was that we only had one indoor swimming pool in town, and that was the swimming pool that the high school had on their grounds. Okay? And they were saying that in the winter time, it's cold where we are, in the winter time, the kids are having to get up at ridiculous hours to go, do the swimming. So I know you guys have similar stories. To go swimming, and it's just not, it's not working out. It's not good. We need more indoor pool space. So I said, okay, that sounds good. And they said, would you campaign on it? Would you include it in your campaign? And it was hard for me to say this, but I said, I don't think I can do that. I said, I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, but I don't think it appeals to enough people that I can actually campaign on it. Well, it turns out that was enough for them, okay? And so they supported me, and they walked doors and, do what we did back then. And so I got elected. 2 years after the election, okay, Parks and Rec was coming to us like every other month with some maintenance issue that needed an expenditure of money. I don't know why we had to authorize it, but nevertheless, they were, And I go, this is crazy. What are we doing this every other month? So I said at a meeting, I said to the Parks and Rec guy, I said, don't you guys have a master plan? Don't you have a capital plan? Don't you have some plan? I said, yeah, but it's outmoded. We outlived it. We outlived its life. So I go, oh, okay. Are you interested in engaging in a new process to develop a new plan? He goes, yeah, sure, yeah. So then at the council meeting, I said, we have 5 members. I said, casually, are there 2 other council members who would be sympathetic to the directing staff to prepare a new Parks and Recreation master plan? They go, yeah, sure, why not? It's not a big thing for council to direct staff to do things like this, right? Okay? And then I said, and you know what? When I was running a couple of years ago, I heard about, not adequate indoor pool space for kids and so on and so forth. Anybody else hear that? And they go, yeah, sure. Well, are there 2 others of you that would recommend that when they do the Parks and Rec master plan, that they pay particular attention to our indoor aquatic facility capacity? I go, yeah, sure, okay. Was I passionate? No. What did I do, though? Whose passion did I give voice to? So what we did next was Now this, I'll tell you about this. This is, okay, I'm going to go back here now. And I want to show you, I'm playing in this arena now. So here's what happens. We get the Parks and Rec master plan, and it calls for an indoor aquatic facility. A really, nice one. I know you guys are working on that too. Nice one. It also included, oh no, that's the Parks and Rec master plan. So we've got the plan, we've got the pool, we don't have the money. Sound familiar? Okay. At the same time this happens, the county, and we're the county seat, so we're right there. The county needs a new jail, and it needs a new facility for visiting nurses and the health department and the mental health facility, mental health group. So they're going to need money for that. In addition, the school district has finally got approval to build a second high school. Okay? We only had one high school, 80,000 people. We have one high school. Finally, we're willing to accept 2 football teams. So they're going to need money as well. So we've got 3 entities that all need money. And we're going to have to go for a public vote on each of these. And I'm the mayor. And I'm going, if we put all these on a ballot at the same time, they're not all going to win. And they're all important. How are we going to structure this? So, what I do is I called the political advisor guy, okay, and the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce. Now, the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, he finished in Lawrence, finished his career as the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce of Greater Southern California. So he was good, okay? So the 3 of us, I said, let's have lunch. And let's talk about how we are going to sequence these votes so that we can get the money for all 3. Say, I'm playing here. And so we're struggling with this at lunch. We're struggling with it. And finally, the chamber guy, he says, I got it. Here's what we do. We do a 1-cent sales tax for the county. The county does a 1-cent sales tax. That's what we vote on, okay? With the money, the county's portion, they can, issue bonds to build what they need to build. With our portion, because the city gets a portion of the countywide sales tax, with our portion, we can fund the Parks and Rec master plan, but we can also reduce the property tax the same amount that the school district will have to raise the property tax in order to get the bond to pay for the second high school. For 1-cent sales tax, we can get everything. Okay? So, said, okay, what do we do now? The chamber guy says, okay, I'll talk to the county administrator. My guy says, I'll talk to the school district representative. And then I said, okay, tell me how it goes, because if I go to the city manager, he's going to say no, not a good idea. But if the other 2 say it's a good idea, and I go to him, he has no choice. He's got to say yes, okay? And we did. And it passed 60-40. So the idea of being able to pull that community resources together, to think about the problem differently, which is, I think, is really, really important. Now, to connect back to the swimmers. Now we've got a campaign for the 1 cent sales tax. Where do you think the swimmers are in this campaign? They're right in front. Okay, it's their passion. We unleashed their passion. I wasn't passionate about it. I didn't have dreams, and so on and so forth. But we unleashed their passion. So let me skip to the currency. Okay, the currency over here is your knowledge and what you have accomplished. All right? The currency here is power, loyalty, and trust. Now, let me say something about power and stories, which is, like I said, does anybody listen when you talk? So I went in my first term, I went to the political advisor guy, and I said, Dan, I was in about 4 months in, and I said, Dan, I campaigned in favor of tax incentives for economic development. And we've gone through that a couple of times, and I'm ready to change my mind. I just don't, it just doesn't comport with the way I think about things. It's just, I don't like it. And you know what he said? He said, you can't do that. He's telling a university faculty member, I can't change my mind. No, you don't get it, Dan. New data, you change your mind on the basis of new data. And he says, no, you don't get it. You haven't been on the council long enough to establish a credibility to change your mind, and people still think when you say you're for something that in fact you are for it. Does that make sense? I didn't say it very well. He said, you don't have the credibility to change your mind. If you change your mind now and then you say something about something, I want this, why would anybody listen? Why would anybody believe you? You're going to change your mind again. Do you see that political world, it's so different from what's happening on the administrative arena. And then, well, trust, trust, but loyalty, it's, God, and maybe it's just me, my personality, I don't know, but loyalty, it's just, because you don't have the structure and, like I said, the hierarchy and all that stuff, these intangibles play an important role there. Okay, so let me go here and talk about the bilingual. The bilingual is the person who can work the gap, understands both political and administrative. Understands efficiency is one of 4 values. If community building is the goal, cups matter. Politics, administration, more than different roles, behaviors, and responsibilities, they are mindset. And the bilingual builds trust and facilitates bridging the gap between what's politically acceptable and administratively sustainable. And here is the summary. Bridging the gap is essential. Role of translator bridge builder is critical. Cups matter. Good politics is about values, not correct answers. Stories matter. They convey values. Do not ignore any value over time. It will come back to haunt you. The democratic process is messy. Politics, administration are ways of thinking. Aligning governing body and staff expectations of each other is crucial. And remember the difference between the representative and the trustee. And that's it. And it's time for lunch, right? Thank you all very much for your attention and time. Thank you.